there's two studies I want to talk about. There was one where the researchers were trying to look at what they called implicit learning or implicit pattern recognition. Implicit basically means like not obvious, so like unconscious. You're not learning purposefully. You're not sitting down with a textbook and trying to memorize information here. This is just learning that happens through experiencing the world without you being involved in it. So researchers, they jumbled up different letters and number combinations, right? And they had one set that was organized through a pattern and one set that was completely nonsense and randomized. So for example, one set might be they had two consonants followed by a vowel, followed by an odd number, followed by another two consonants. And that pattern would repeat and repeat and repeat. And another string of letters and numbers was just completely random. And they showed participants these two strands of letters and numbers. And they asked the participants, could you select which one has a pattern, if any, right? They weren't told what the rule was. They were just told, is there a pattern in either of these? And the participants managed to recognize the pattern more frequently than chance. Right? So they concluded that it was a significant result. But what was really interesting is when they asked the participants to tell them what the pattern was, they couldn't. It was either, I don't know, or they made up some rule that was bullshit. So they deceived themselves, basically. So that's the first study, which showed that humans can implicitly recognize patterns, like random, mundane, futile, like not like anything that's really applicable to life, just they can learn patterns. The second study is even more interesting. Have you ever heard people talk about this idea that you can somehow notice when someone's staring at you? Like you turn around and you see somebody looking at you, and you wonder, how did you know, right? We think that's a thing. So they actually studied it. And they put someone blindfolded in the middle of a room, and they said, people are going to come out and look at you at random times, and we want you to tell us when you think someone is staring at you, right? And they found that people could do this and accurately know when someone was looking at them more than chance. And that sounds quite scary or interesting, doesn't it? The phenomena that how do you have this insight that someone's looking at you? Well, what was interesting is they did a second study that actually found out that was bullshit. What they did is they took away the feedback. So rather than when the participants said, I think someone is staring at me and saying that's correct or incorrect, they didn't say anything. They let the whole trial go on and the person tell you when they thought they were being stared at throughout the whole thing, rather than saying, I think I'm being stared at, okay, that's correct, incorrect, and going on, right? No feedback. And they then found that the results were chance, right? Not significant. And what they concluded was what the people were actually doing were implicitly recognizing the patterns of when people were brought out to stare at them. Because what they actually concluded was that trying to do something randomly is difficult. The feedback of being told you're correct, someone is staring at you, then led them to recognize, okay, they're not counting in their head, it's all unconscious, but they had this insight into when somebody was in the room staring at them because they'd recognized the patterns of people coming into the room. That sounds like a lot of waffle, but the overall TLDR, like basic synopsis of that is, we can recognize patterns unconsciously. And John Vervaeke put this in a very interesting way where he said, think about the social scene. There's a lot of patterns, right? How far you should stand from someone. Okay, how you should go into a room, how you should shake their hands, how your body language should be. They're all patterns that we're used to in the world. Because when someone stands too close to you, right, or does some weird body language that you find alarming, you feel that, don't you? That is almost a physiological response. And so it's not consciously articulated. And I was thinking about how he was talking about this in the context of sort of flow state and in implicit learning, and what gives us meaning in life is following the patterns that we pick up. But I looked at it in a different way. I was thinking about being able to recognize patterns allows you to be efficient in all areas of life, right? Take my sport of wheelchair basketball, for example. It's all just patterns. It's Defensively, what structure should we hold to stop the other team scoring as best we possibly can? On offense, how do we build structures, and where do we pass the ball at certain times, and where do we set screens, and when is the right shot? When is the right shot opening up, and who should be taking that shot? And then think about it in a academic sense, in that there are patterns in how you should write something. If you're writing a essay or an academic paper, it has to be in a certain structure. Or think about what makes good viral content. It's all patterns. It's how do you hook the person within the first 5 seconds? How do you create a narrative? How do you build that narrative? There should be a conflict. That conflict should then be resolved, and it should be satisfying. And I realized that if you can learn to recognize the patterns of reality on an implicit level, and then make that conscious, and practice following the patterns in effective ways, you can be brilliant at different things if you think about it in this way. It's kind of I don't know, a bit of one of Joel's weird, like, OCD, autistic ways of looking at things. But I basically had an epiphany in the car where I was like, yeah, intelligence, or applied intelligence, like wisdom, comes down to pattern recognition. Now,